Hi, Gabe. Welcome to Crashing On. How are you
Thank you so
doing?
much. I'm well, thanks. Thank you for having me. How
Oh,
are
it's a
you?
pleasure. I'm great. Can't complain. Um, so, we here because you have a new film coming out. It runs in the family. So tell us what the film is about.
Sure, yes. Runs in the Family is a movie about a father and son, quite an unlikely father and son pair. It's a Indian South African dad and his transgender son who go on a kind of wacky road trip across the country to rescue the son's long lost mother out of a rehab clinic that she's been put into by some dodgy ex-boyfriend of hers. And they break her out and they have to rush back home in time for the son to compete in a big drag competition with a massive cash prize that the son is hoping to use to get his gender affirming top surgery.
Okay. So, first question I have about that is like, so what is it like working with your real life father who directs the film? Like,
It was the
it's so
best. We've
interesting.
we've worked together quite a bit. He's a director. He's done some films, some TV, and some commercials over the years, and he's also my biggest mentor and one of my best friends. We have a really good working relationship, and the only new thing about this film was that it was sort of a film about us. Obviously, the story is made up; it's fictional, but the characters were very much us. You know, I really modeled the two lead characters on the type of sort of positive relationship that we have, because I haven't seen a lot of positive parent-child relationships where the child is trans. So I really wanted to show that because it's possible, because my dad has shown me that it's possible. So I want other people to know that it's possible to love their trans kids, and other trans people to know that it's possible to have parents who are supportive and fun, and even if they make mistakes, like, they just love you, so they'll ride along with you. So that was the new aspect to making this film, is that it was the first time we were working with content that came from home a little more. You know, it wasn't outside of us; it was very much a part of us. But it went beautifully. You know, we have a real shorthand because we understand each other in terms of like vision and values and stuff. So it was easy for us to be on the same page, and then we had to get everyone else on the same page as us for our kind of shared vision, because I wrote it and he directed it, but obviously he also sat in on some of the scripting and kind of challenged me to make it stronger here and there and whatnot, so it was very collaborative.
And was the process like therapeutic for the two of you to go through together?
Yeah, I think it was, not in the sense that we weren't already close, but in the sense that we discovered new things about each other. And I think, when I came out as trans to my dad, he didn't know a lot about what it meant to be trans. All he had seen was what he'd seen on like film and TV, which is usually very negative. Usually, someone's going to die or be really sad or never loved or lonely and no family and kicked out and whatnot. So his immediate response wasn't a negative response, but he was nervous. He was like, "Are you sure people aren't going to be nice to you? People aren't going to understand you. It might isolate you." And so, what was really beautiful about working on the story together and then eventually shooting it together was that he got to kind of ask questions, like personal questions about how I felt as a trans person in this world, that I think maybe he would have been shy to ask if we weren't working on this film together. But because he could ask about the character, it was his way, I think, of asking me just things about like how I feel, and when I feel in danger, when I feel safe, and what means the most to me in terms of support. So that was cool. And I think the reverse also happened. I got to ask him questions about his youth and his identity, and figuring out the kind of man that he wanted to be as a young guy, and then as he got older as well. So we I guess we used discussions about the character to kind of talk about us in a way that was different to how we usually talk about us, because we kind of just know each other.
So, you know, you- what what exactly like inspired the film? Was it your relationship with your father? Was it the father son relationship we don't usually see? Like, what would you
Yeah,
say?
you hit the nail on the head with both of those things. First and foremost, well, a cute little anecdote that I can tell you is that my dad turned 70 a few years ago, 2, 3 years ago, and he was in sort of development limbo on a number of films that he was trying to get made. His previous film was Four Corners, which was in 2014, and then there was a long gap where he was developing scripts with various different writers. Some were with me, some were with other people, and for some reason in the industry, it was just hard to get something off the ground, to get the funding for it. And so he said, can you write me, a lot of those were like sort of action thrillers, and he's very political and he has a lot to say, and so a lot of them get quite big in sort of scale. So for his 70th birthday, he said to me, can you give me a present for my 70th? Can you write me a film that'll get made? Keep it something small and light that isn't going to be too expensive. And so when I sat down and thought, what would I want to write for him that would get made, that is like a beautiful, small, heartfelt family story, I immediately was like, well, I would write about us. Because firstly, as you said, I haven't seen that kind of father-child or father-son representation before that's positive. And secondly, because if it was a gift to him, I also wanted it to kind of be an ode to the kind of great father that he is. So a combination of those things, I guess.
I love that.
Thanks.
So what are, like, when crafting the film, what are the important aspects that you were like, this has to be in the film? Like, I'm not cutting this out, I'm not editing this part.
That's a nice question, because, there were questions about, there are always questions around the casting in specifically queer films and trans films. And immediately when we went to, like, when we were speaking to the funders about it and when we were talking to production about it, people were like, who are you going to get to play the trans character? Because, are there even any trans actors? And I was immediately like, well, firstly, I'm a trans actor, so I can be the fallback, but I'd also like for us to open the call to any trans actors to come and audition for it. And unfortunately, we didn't get any. Our casting director tried, but no one auditioned. But it's also, it was very important to me that the representation was correct, that the trans character is always played by a trans actor, because when we don't do that, that's when misconceptions about trans people pop up, because we're not being represented by ourselves. It's like with any community or any marginalized person. You just won't get the same nuance if it's not played by the person themselves, right? Not them exactly themselves, but someone with the same experience.
I get it, yeah.
But I am also, my background is in acting before writing, so I was also always happy, like, I was like, if we find casting that works for it, great. If we don't, I will absolutely step in and do it. I don't mind playing kind of myself, and it's close to home, so it didn't feel like a problem for me. But everyone did have that question, first of all. And then second of all, there were things along the way where it just, because we are on this tight budget and a short shooting schedule, there was like, at one point there was a question about, well, do we need all the drag queens? Because we have this show in the film of a whole lot of South African drag acts. And that was something that I stood very firmly by when there was a suggestion that we drop some of the drag acts. And I was like, no, we have booked these, I think it's 6 drag artists who are incredible and who represent the South African drag community, which I don't. I'm very involved as an audience member in the South African drag community, but I'm not a drag queen like the drag queens that we have here. And they are so good at what they do, and they need more representation of them so that people can hire them and pay them and they can keep doing the cool stuff that they're doing. So I was immediately like, no, we're not cutting them. That was something I felt very strongly about, because I didn't want to be representing drag but without the drag artists involved. So that was one thing. And we had Manila Vontees, who's one of our top drag queens in the country, who was a drag consultant. She made sure that everything that was said about drag in the script and everything that was seen about drag in the script was kind of authentic to our drag community. So I think those are the things that I was like the most cagey about, just in terms of wanting to protect like queer culture and what we're saying. But beyond that, I just wanted to make sure that we had a beautiful story that was authentic to us. And so in casting the characters around us, the friends, the mother, the father, we just wanted to make sure that these were all people who could bring a kind of level of authenticity and quirkiness, because we're quite a quirky pair, me and my dad, and we wanted to reflect that as best we could.
I have a question, like following up on the drag scenes. I mean, I haven't seen the film, but I read that you included like a lot of POC drag queens, and I thought that was so cool, because I mean, for me personally, like I'm obviously coloured and I live in a coloured area in Cape Town, and I'm so used, the only drag queens I see are coloured, so I'm like,
same.
So I'm like, but it's so great to see that like represented on screen. Like, it's not just you don't just get the white drag queens, or you know, there's more, there's the just like in South Africa, there's a whole culture.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you bring that up because it wasn't like I was like, oh, let's go find some POC drag queens. I was like, all the drag queens I know are POC. So it wasn't, it was the reverse. It wasn't deciding to go find POC drag queens. It was like, okay, well, when I think of drag in Cape Town and the best drag that I've seen in the country, it's all POC drag queens. So that's who we're going to have in the show, because that, for me, felt like it was the best reflection of our drag community here. And I mean, you must know, our queens know how to do it. Like,
Yeah.
just in Cape Town alone. I mean, we didn't even dip into like Joburg drag queens or anywhere else. I was like, we have what we need all here, right here in Cape Town.
So I want to talk about the casting of your parents, because I mean, Ace Bhatti and Diaan Lawrenson are icons in their own right. So why did you choose them?
Well, we went through quite a rigorous audition process, and we felt, it always helps a film to have name actors in terms of getting the funding and getting interest for it. So when we were struggling to find an Indian dad that felt kind of quirky and cool and young enough, but still kind of old and sort of sweet and wise enough at the same time, that was going to be cool with also the trans aspect, that started to get difficult, because we have a couple of actors here who I think are great and could have fit the role in terms of like race and in terms of being South African, but it's also hard to find someone who really could grapple with the content of the film in a way that we felt was respectful and willing to learn. So that's why we decided that for the dad character we would also cast our net out towards the UK and see if we could afford any kind of name or name-ish actor from the UK to bring a little bit more prestige to the film internationally. And so we cast a couple of, once we'd gone through the South African auditions, we went to the UK casting director for a few UK like older Indian guys to play the dad. And it was really sweet watching all these guys, because in the audition we asked them to do a couple of scenes, but also to do a song of their choice in drag of their choice. We didn't explain it. So some of them came with lipstick and a scarf, another one came with a sari. They got to have like a little bit of fun in the auditions, which was really cool. And ultimately we landed on Ace because he had a really sort of earnest quirk to him that we really liked, and he had the name, he's quite a well-known name in the UK especially, but also internationally, and he just nailed the audition. We really loved him. And then but then the challenge with him was getting him to feel like he could conceivably be a guy. He doesn't have to have been born and bred in South Africa, but that he could be this Indian guy who's lived in South Africa. We didn't ever stipulate in the film where he was originally from. So if you feel that he's not South African, it's not a train smash, Because my dad as well is also, he's got this like slightly sort of Anglophone accent, and he's like a strange sort, a mix of things as well, because he travelled a lot and he lived in grew up in KZN but lived in Joburg, travelled Cape to Cape Town, so he's all over the place. So we weren't too fussed about that casting wise. And then for the mother, Diaan Lawrenson, who was Pola in Seven de Lang, which I see has just announced that they are finally stopping after however many seasons. She also just aced an audition. We went out to a bunch of the fantastic South African actresses we have, and we felt like the character is a complex one, because it's not a spoiler to say that the son, it really resents her for leaving him when he was a baby. So she's kind of hated by him in the beginning, and she has to really try and redeem herself despite being a woman who quite complexly didn't want to be a mother. So she was very careful to make sure that the character comes across as someone who you can empathize with. Even if you wouldn't ditch your child, you can at least understand why she ditched hers, And I think she really pulled that off. I think she's an actress who manages to hold two truths at the same time. And she gets to be this fun, bold, wild woman who is not tied down by the idea of family, but also someone who feels deep regret for not having that family. So we really like that about her.
So has entertainment, like, I know obviously it's in your blood, but has it always been like, this is what I'm going to do, this is the path I'm going to take?
Yeah, it has. I mean, in different forms. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a musician, and then I think even then, when I was young, my dad was always telling me to like think up stories. Like even if we were like waiting in a line somewhere, he'd be like, if I said I was bored or something, he'd be like, first of all, you can't be bored because you have things, and second of all, if you're bored, use your imagination. That's the best toy. And like look over there and see those people talking, and now like write in a little notebook what you think their conversation is, or what you think is behind that locked door. Or, you know, he would just kind of encourage me to use my imagination all the time, which was fantastic training for writing, completely unbeknownst to him. You know, he was just trying to keep his kid busy, but it ended up being the thing that I think led me into the kind of theatre and film world. And I started in theatre and then moved into film later on. And it is very much in my family. A lot of my family members are in the film industry, so I was very privileged in the sense that it was never a fight with family to join. You know, a lot of people have to like convince their families that it's not a ludicrous idea to join the film industry. So I didn't have that kind of in my way. But it's also then been a challenge to figure out what my voice is and kind of work out who I am separate to my family as well, which is a very privileged challenge to have, and I do recognize that. But yes, I have always wanted to be in some kind of storytelling. And I've figured out that I think writing and directing are the ones that bring me the most joy, but I also really love acting. And I stopped acting for a long time because I was kind of figuring out that I was trans and I didn't know how I was going to be castable and whatnot, so I needed to take some time away from it. And now that I'm coming back to it as myself and in a body that I feel good in, it's such a fun profession as well.
So, you know, you directed No Hiding Here, the first South African gay rom-com, which I loved. I told you that in the email.
Thank you so much.
But, so what was the response like to that?
It was cool. I mean, it was, you know, my main focus with No Hiding Here, again, we had like, in this one it was a shoestring budget. It's for a TV movie for Showmax, and, you know, they were doing a slate of 8 films in the space of, I don't know, 2 months or something ridiculous. And it was a huge challenge, and it was my first directing challenge, so it was a big learning curve for me and a great opportunity to cut my teeth on and work out what kind of director I want to be. But my main focus with No Hiding Here was to make it as unapologetically queer as possible, and to not make a film that was about the trauma of queerness and about the pain of it, but rather to just make a film that was about like queers who like make mistakes and are out, or one is out and one is not, it doesn't matter. Like there's just a complexity to it that is queer. I tried to get pronouns on the cast, on the call sheets. I tried to get all of our head of departments in the crew to be queer as much as I could. I really just wanted to see if changing the kind of hierarchy and the dynamic on set and queering up the actual shoot would result in any kind of difference in the product that came out of it. And I think that when you watch it, it's hard for me to say because I'm so inside of it, but I think that when I watch it, I do feel that sort of queer joy inside it. Even for its flaws that I can see now after having made it, you always look back at something and go, oh, I should have done this or I shouldn't have done that or whatever. But I do hope that comes across. And I think the response was beautiful, especially from queer South Africans who saw it and saw some part of themselves in one of the characters. And that's who it's for, really.
Now, you know, as you were talking about like putting pronouns on the call sheets and stuff, and I was wondering, you know, what are the challenges for, you know, queer filmmakers in South African industry? And I'm sure it's...
Oh, there are loads. But it seems to be getting a little bit better. You know, it depends also who you're working with. And it's like in any industry, it's a sort of top-down issue. So if queers are just being hired as the kind of diversity box tick to be in front of the camera, but everyone behind camera and everyone in production is all straight, then that's where you feel the sort of incongruence, and it doesn't actually help anyone with anything. But when you start to see queer producers, directors, writers, and getting their stories made, and then you start to see how they insist on queer actors playing the queer characters, and you start to see this kind of synergy, it really opens things up, and it always benefits the story because you'll always then have more nuance and more understanding behind what you're trying to say. I think the big challenge is we still see gatekeeping of queer stories on the kind of broader scale. So, for example, the streamer who I can't mention yet, but it's will become obvious, who will broadcast Runs in the Family, they were really great about it. They were like, no, there were no questions about the transness. In fact, if anything, they were just like, can you make it clearer sooner that he's trans in the story when they first read the script? And so I had to put in some little things because they were like, we're worried the audience isn't going to catch up to it. So they were really wonderful. However, that same streamer, when they license something or commission something that is supposed to be for the whole continent, they have to then negotiate with governments, for example, like Uganda, who will reject this kind of content, right? And so the gatekeeping that happens is usually got to do with kind of political issues or geographical problems, right? And so I think the more that the streamers and the studios and the sort of the big people can kind of help us to push politically to be able to tell our own stories, the better. I still think that's probably the kind of biggest roadblock that we come up against. But then there's also small things like, for example, people not understanding pronouns, and I have a lot of queer friends whose pronouns just don't get respected on set, and they eventually end up going, well, I'll lose work if I push it, so let me rather just not complain, which is a sad place to be, unfortunately, you know. So there are things big and small that can be done that still need to be done.
So I was reading your piece in the You magazine during Pride Month.
Oh no.
But just wait.
Was very paraphrased, let me just say, none of my own words, which I was quite disappointed to see. But,
okay. So then I don't know if I should say this, but what did strike me was that you said that, well, it said that everyone focuses on the medical transition of being trans, and people don't talk about the social transition. And then, when I was, doing research about the film, I was like, it kind of all knits into each other. So,
absolutely.
Did that factor into, the making of the film?
Yeah, I'll try to say this without giving a spoiler for how the film ends, but I had two options for an ending. And the big question that I had to ask myself is, what do I want to tell other trans people? Do I want to tell you that, because in a film, every film is set up, pretty much every mainstream or commercial film is set up to be like a character has a goal and they either do or don't achieve that goal, right? So if I'm setting up right at the beginning that River, the character, wants top surgery, then what am I saying if he doesn't get it, and what am I saying if he does? If he does get it, am I saying that that is the be-all and end-all of being trans, and if you don't get that, then you're failing as a trans person? Because that's not what I believe. I don't believe you need surgery to be trans, and I don't believe everyone's trans medical or non-medical or social transition looks the same. So I didn't want to say that. I also didn't want to leave everyone feeling completely hopeless where he clearly wants it and doesn't get it. So I had to come up with an ending that addressed that without being too on the nose, but which still, I wanted it to instill hope in the people who do want surgery, but I wanted it to also tell everyone that the surgery doesn't define you or your transness, and whether you want it or not. If you want it and you can't get it, you're still okay. And if you don't want it and you don't get it, you're still okay. But I wanted to try and get that across, but also without being like, here's a message. So it was a difficult thing, but it's definitely something that, in previous interviews I've done for the film, the thing that I always say is, I want people to take away from this is that there are as many ways to be trans as there are trans people, and you've got to kind of pave your own way and find the people who will support you along the way. That's all I'm trying to say with this film. So it does kind of talk to that thing, because your medical transition is only one way to be trans, and it is not the only way.
Love that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask the final question. So this is a question we ask everybody. This is just my disclaimer. But who was your first celebrity crush?
Angelina Jolie.
Oh, perfect.
I'm sorry to say it came so quickly, but I was obsessed with her as a kid. I had posters of her. I even had an autograph from her that my aunt had gotten. I was nuts about her. And I think it was because It was probably Tomb Raider that did it, but then after that I just watched everything of hers. But I think it was just because she was a tomboy and I didn't see a lot of that at the time. And so I think that was my first sign that you could be cool and beautiful and masculine at the same time. Before I understood, actually, no, I'm a trans dude, I thought, okay, well then maybe that's the type of girl that I'm supposed to be, because I don't feel like the type of girl who's doing the stuff that everyone else is telling me to do. So I think that's probably what's beneath it. But also I just thought she was like super cool and super hot.
I love it. Thank you so much, Gabe, for chatting
Thank
to
you,
me.
Caryn.
This was lovely.
It was. Thank you for the lovely questions and for the time.